So that brings us to today's program, Life After Roe. And so before we get into the decision, I want to give a little bit of history on Roe, Doe, and Casey, a little bit of legal background, which will, I think, help you really see how strong the decision actually was. So we're going to start with a little bit of background. So Roe versus Wade, 1970s, basically came out and said you can get an abortion in the first and second trimester. We're going to be really simplified here with what the court cases said, because I want to keep it high level. Roe basically said first and second trimester, you can get an abortion. And they came up with that trimester schedule. So that sounds, not entirely horrible, because it doesn't cover the third trimester, but then on the same day, they released Doe, so Roe and Doe. Doe said you can get an abortion anytime if the health of the mother is at risk. Which again, it almost sounds somewhat reasonable until you read the definition of health, and it was, if there's potential mental anxiety or something like that. If you're stressed out over the baby, that's the health of the mother. Roe and Doe gave us abortion all 9 months when it boils down. So 1970s, we have abortion all 9 months of pregnancy. Fast forward 20 years, and we see Planned Parenthood versus Casey come before the court. Now, a lot of conservatives, a lot of Christians are like, hey, it's been 20 years, Casey's going to overturn Roe. We're going to be pro-life again. Instead of overturning Roe, they amended it. So they got rid of the 3-trimester schedule, because again, when Roe was decided, they thought, hey, the third trimester is when viability is, that's when the baby's viable. So that's when we'll say, the first 2 trimesters. And keep in mind, when Roe was decided, one of their reasons for ruling was, hey, we see this as a national issue that's boiling up. We want to settle the issue for the country. Did they settle the issue? No, 20 years later it wasn't settled, and even 50 years later today it's not settled. So, Planned Parenthood versus Casey, they said you can't prohibit abortion, the states can't prohibit abortion before viability. Instead of the trimester schedule, they came up with the viability line. And that's that red line right there. Has medical technology changed from the 90s to today? Yes. So the viability line when they decided it was probably, somewhere in here. Today it's somewhere in here. If you're in a really good hospital, maybe it's here. The viability line is somewhat subjective. On top of the viability line, which they just made up, they said before viability, you can regulate, but you can't put an undue burden in the way of the woman. So for example, here in South Dakota, if a lady goes in to schedule her abortion, she has to wait 72 hours before coming back. Just to give her time to think about it. She has to wait 72 hours. Is that an undue burden and an unnecessary obstacle in her way? Or is that a necessary safeguard? Well, that decision was in lawsuits and fights, and we actually won that one. Or you take, for example, the notifying parents. If it's a minor, you have to notify the parents. Is that an unnecessary obstacle or a necessary safeguard? We say one, they say another. That's why there's been so many lawsuits, so many fights, so much subjectivity to what's going on. So again, I give you a little bit of this background just to show you there's been a ton of lawsuits, a ton of discussions, a ton of rulings, a ton of amicus briefs, legislative policies, bills that passed, bills that failed. Did the Roe versus Wade court settle the issue? Not even close. And when they decided Casey, they thought they were making it better, but really they just made it more confusing. So then we get to Dobbs versus Jackson. This was Mississippi's 15-week prohibition. After 15 weeks, you can't do abortion. So keep in mind that this is important because that red line, somewhere around 20-ish weeks. So everyone kind of saw that, hey, this is before that viability line, this strikes against Roe and Casey. So their options are strike down the Mississippi law because it goes against Roe and Casey. They could try to find a way to keep the Mississippi law, but not overturn Roe and try to finagle the middle somehow. Or they could just strike down Roe and Casey. We were pretty sure they weren't going to do the first option because the court below them had ruled against Mississippi. And so it would be really weird for the Supreme Court to take a case just to give the exact same opinion as the other court already did. So we were pretty sure the first option wasn't going to happen. And we knew it was a choice between either try to finagle a middle ground allow Mississippi but don't overturn Roe and walk the middle somehow, or just overturn Roe versus Wade. 6-3 vote to uphold Mississippi, 5-4 vote overrule it all. And so that's why you hear some people say it was a 6-3 decision, others say it was a 5-4 decision. You heard both because Justice Roberts flipped as far as what he wanted to actually do. So he agreed that we should uphold Mississippi. He disagreed that we should overturn Roe. And we'll get to that in a minute, but he was the voice of let's find a middle ground to try and finagle this thing. So I want to get into just a few quotes from the decision, and then some of the back and forth that we got to see, just to show you really, I mean, honestly, it's going to sound odd, but we're going to get into some really exciting legal jargon. And I know that sounds like an oxymoron, but I wanted to show you pieces of the case to show you really how strongly they decided. Even though the Constitution makes no mention of abortion, the Roe Court held that it confers a broad right to obtain one. It did not claim that American law or the common law had ever recognized such a right, and its survey of history ranged from the constitutionally irrelevant to the plainly incorrect. They're saying the Roe Court, when they looked back at history, everything they brought up was either irrelevant or incorrect when they decided. We hold that Roe and Casey must be overruled. We didn't think it was going to be that clear. We were pessimistically expecting a finagling, middle-of-the-road, convoluted way forward for us to protect life. They came right out and said it. Roe and Casey are overruled. Roe was egregiously wrong from the start. Its reasoning was exceptionally weak, and the decision has had damaging consequences. And far from bringing about a national settlement in the abortion issue, because remember the court in Roe said, hey, we're going to settle this for you. We're going to settle the abortion issue. Roe and Casey have inflamed debate and deepened division. It is time to heed the Constitution and return the issue of abortion to the people's elected representatives. The permissibility of abortion and the limitations upon it are to be resolved, like most important questions in our democracy, by citizens trying to persuade one another and then voting. They sent it back to the states. Now the decision is 222 or 223 pages long. There's just some excerpts from it. There's one more that I want to show you because they didn't just give a decision. One thing that you'll see if you ever read Supreme Court decisions, you learn so much because they really defend everything they decided and give all of their reasons for it, the legal reasons, the logical reasons, the common sense reasons, and they just go really into depth. So if we step away from this discussion for a second, have you heard the difference between positive freedom and negative freedom, or freedom from and freedom for? Or some people say the difference between freedom and liberty, or the need for ordered liberty. Have you heard that discussion before? It's basically the idea that we as a person, as a society, should be asking, what am I allowed to do? What am I free to do? But also, what should I be doing? And holding those two questions in balance is what gives us true liberty and a flourishing society. A lot of people today, if you look around, honestly, they're only asking the first one. What am I allowed to do, or what are you trying to prohibit me from doing? I should have the freedom to do whatever I want. But for a successful society, you need to hold both questions in balance. What am I allowed to do? What should I be doing? One of the terms for holding those two in balance is called ordered liberty. The court did not claim that this broadly framed right to abortion is absolute, and no such claim would be plausible. While individuals are certainly free to think and say what they wish about existence, meaning, the universe, and the mystery of human life, they're not always free to act in accordance with those thoughts. License to act on the basis of such beliefs may correspond to one of the many understandings of liberty, but it is certainly not ordered liberty. The court didn't just make a legal decision. They went into the depths of, we as a society need to be talking about what ordered liberty looks like. Again, I bring this up to show you how clear the court was on this, which we were not expecting, and how deep of a discussion they're calling for nationally. So how it works when they decide these cases, they vote early on, the majority writes their opinion, then those who disagree, they get to write their thoughts. It's called the dissent. A few quotes from them. In the end, the majority throws long-standing precedent to the winds without showing that anything significant has changed to justify its radical reshaping of the law. The reasons for retaining Roe and Casey gain further strength from the overwhelming reliance interests those decisions have created. For half a century now, in Casey's words, the ability of women to participate equally in the economic and social life of the nation have been facilitated by their ability to control their reproductive lives. Abortion is a common medical procedure and a familiar experience in women's lives. As Casey understood, people today rely on their ability to control and time their pregnancies when making countless life decisions. Where to live, whether and how to invest in education or careers, how to allocate financial resources, and how to approach intimate and family relationships. Basically, all the dissent could say was, you can't do this, it's been around for 50 years. Women need this to be equal to men, and people like this because they plan on it. Not very deep arguments for why you should be able to kill a baby. So again, in this back and forth discussion that happens, the majority gets to respond to the dissent after it's written. The dissent cannot establish that a right to abortion has ever been a part of this nation's tradition. According to the dissent, the Constitution requires that states to regard a fetus as lacking even the most basic human right, to live, at least until an arbitrary point in the pregnancy has passed. Again, that viability line. On many other occasions, this court has overruled important constitutional decisions. Without these decisions, American constitutional law, as we know it, would be unrecognizable, and this would be a different country. No justice of this court has ever argued, again, this is the response to the dissent. No justice of this court has ever argued that a court should never overrule a constitutional decision, but overruling a precedent is a serious matter. In this case, 5 factors weigh strongly in favor of overruling Roe and Casey: the nature of their error, the quality of their reasoning, the workability of the rules they impose on the country, their disruptive effect on other areas of the law, and the absence of concrete reliance. Again, they just give it to them. You can come up with reasons why we shouldn't do this. Here's 5 reasons why we're doing this, not just one. Again, Justice Roberts, remember I mentioned he was the flip? He got to write his thoughts on why we should keep Mississippi but not overturn Roe. He says, I would take a more measured course, out of adherence to a simple yet fundamental principle of judicial restraint. If it is not necessary to decide more to dispose of a case, then it is necessary not to decide more. Most of us here would agree with judicial restraint. Judges shouldn't just be going off of the rails, doing whatever they want. They should restrain themselves to what the Constitution says. So he's trying to use that as reasoning. Here, there's a clear path to deciding this case correctly without overruling Roe. You can see at the bottom, he says, the viability line should be discarded, but let's leave for another day whether we reject any right to an abortion at all. Basically, let's kick the can down the road. Again, the majority gets to respond. We cannot embrace a narrow ground for decision simply because it is narrow. It must also be right. For the reasons that we have explained, the concurrence approach is not. The turmoil wrought by Roe and Casey would be prolonged. It is far better for this court and for the country to face up to the real issue without further delay. They gave it to us straight. The concurrence would do exactly what it criticizes Roe for doing, pulling out of thin air a test that no party or amicus asked the court to adopt. Because again, in oral arguments, they asked both sides, do you want us to find a way to finagle this down the middle? Both sides said no, either uphold this or overrule it. Justice Roberts was trying to finagle the middle. So what does it mean for South Dakota? Well, the answer here is fairly simple, actually. We had a trigger law on the books. So as soon as Roe was overruled, abortion was essentially illegal here, except for reasons, if the doctor believes that it's needed to save the life of the mother. Now, if we look to 2024, we've already heard there's a group trying to put this on the ballot. They want to put Roe into our South Dakota Constitution. Abortion at all 9 months. So there's going to have to be all hands on deck starting here real soon. They're going to start their petition signatures here soon. We need to be fighting hard. We've already been having a few strategy discussions of what we're going to do. We have to kill this thing and kill it hard when it comes to the 2024 ballot. So in South Dakota, the answer for what's next, there's not a lot of policies that need to be changed. And there's not a lot of laws that need to be written. There's a few things we can change and tweak. There's always room for improvement. But for us, the answer is mostly cultural. Because again, we've always said we want to make abortion illegal, but also unthinkable. So we want to move now from the policies to the people, because that's really where the change is going to happen here in South Dakota. So I want to invite Debbie Pease with South Dakota Right to Life to come up, just to give a brief overview of the history of the pro-life movement as far as the grassroots level and what really led to success.
Use this.
Sure. And you got to keep the mic up real close. It's not very sensitive.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Norman, and thanks for having me. It's a blessing to be with you all. Can you hear it? All right, so I'm going to try to give you a brief history and the key factors that led to our success in 6 minutes or less. Or Norman says, nah, you can go 8. So pre-Roe v. Wade, in 1966, every state prohibited abortion except for the life of the mother. There were 2 exceptions, one state for rape and one for fetal deformity. In 1967, Colorado was the first state to broadly legalize abortion, and then in 1970, New York also legalized abortion, and then they tried to repeal it unsuccessfully in 1972. Between 1970 and 1973, there were 33 attempts in the state to legalize abortion, and they all failed. And then, as Norman said, on January 22nd, we had Roe and Doe released by the Supreme Court. Roe was a 7-2 decision and wiped out all those protected laws through all 50 states. They said abortion on demand. They didn't know when life began, but they legalized abortion anyway. As Norman said, they did a trimester. They said abortion was legal for the first 2 trimesters. And really, since that time, there's been a limit on what states can do to protect babies. We've done everything we can up to that line, but we haven't been able to outright ban abortion. The next slide is Doe v. Bolton, and as Norman said, that basically said, the health of the mother, you can have an abortion for the health of the mother, and anything went, from fear of pain or discomfort of having the baby. What mom who's pregnant doesn't have that? So it basically opened the floodgates to all 9 months of pregnancy. So there were basically 3 ways that the pro-life movement could go about attacking Roe and trying to get the rights back to the states. The first one was to pass a constitutional amendment. That requires a 2/3 vote of the Congress, and then it has to be ratified by 3/4 of the state. That never happened. The second way was to change the Supreme Court, which takes a long time. You know that the president nominates the Supreme Court justices, and the Senate has to approve them. And we know now that that was the winning strategy, thanks to President Trump and the 3 nominees that he was able to put on the Supreme Court, and that the Senate was able to ratify. And the third point that the federal government and many of the states worked toward was dismantling Roe point by point. Things like partial birth abortion bans, parental notification, Unborn Victims of Violence Act. So this next slide highlights the key factors that led to this successfully overturning Roe. The fight began immediately, and we never gave up, right? We had hope, and giving up was not an option. So that's, there's been a lot of other issues that have come, and people give up. Well, people have not given up on this issue. We've had the Hyde Amendment to take federal funding out of abortion. We've had pregnancy resource centers pop up all over the country. The last thing I heard is for every abortion facility, there were 14 pregnancy help centers. And that's recent. So, the people have been working. We've been winning the science. Like Norman mentioned, there is a huge difference between the science of 1973 and the science of now. Look at the ultrasounds we see now. Most kids grow up with their first baby picture being an ultrasound. So that leads us, we're also winning the hearts and the minds of the youth. And I think a lot of that has to do with the science. And they see the pro-life champions who are not giving up. They're sticking it out. And the other thing, I wanted to mention too on the youth, when I went to the March for Life in 2019, it was just a wave of youth. So many youth there. And we see that at our hour of reflection in Pier every January. This year we had over 400 people. Over half of them were 25 and under. So we're winning the youth. And then the state efforts. I'm going to go through these next slides really quickly. Many states have passed right-to-know laws. Those are, we call them informed consent laws in South Dakota. Parental involvement laws, pain-capable abortion bans, partial birth abortion, state bans. These are all state efforts to chink away at Roe versus Wade. Over 1,300 laws, pro-life laws, have been passed since Roe. In 2021 alone, 98 laws were passed in 26 states. So that's kind of the lead up to the court overturning Roe. This was an active issue. This was not decided, and it's still not decided. There's still a battle ahead. But the results of all these efforts have been a massive decline in induced abortion, especially in South Dakota. In 2008, we had 848 abortions. 56 of those were with minors. And in 2021, we were down to 192 and only 6 minors. So to put that in perspective, South Dakota had about half the abortions of North Dakota, and we have 100,000 more people here. So South Dakota has been doing a good job through our state legislature and basically changing the hearts and minds of people through our education. The next slide just kind of gives you a graph of how those abortions have been going down through the years. And with our trigger law in place, that's going to be even further. And the next slide shows us 5 very courageous people that we need to be very grateful for. That decision was very bold, and that will be a wonderful thing as we move forward. So our mission is not over because Roe has been overturned. We know that we have to keep working because many South Dakota mothers and their babies are at risk of going across state lines for abortion. We need to change hearts and minds. And that is the mission of South Dakota Right to Life. As Norman said, we have a conference coming up in Rapid City end of September. There are little cards on the table as you go out if you want to take one of these. I think we have about 100 people registered so far. The first 100 people to register get a free patriotic My Pillow, a little travel-sized pillow. So you want to register early so you can go. And I'm hearing that there might be a debate in Rapid City for the governor's race that Friday, so that might be another reason to make it worth going out there. So we really need to focus on education. The convention is there to give us the tools to do that, and we're also at fair booths across the state. If you're interested in helping with the fair booth for our South Dakota Right to Life, you can see me afterwards. I'm working on the Sioux Falls booth, Turner County in Parker, and Clay County in Vermilion. So just a key to our success, I believe, is the hope that we've kept alive. And we believe the protection of the unborn will be totally restored. Though we don't know the hour of the day, the future belongs to life, and the Right to Life movement is forever. Thank you.
Thanks, Debbie. So that was a little bit of a look back. And next I want to start looking forward. And one of the things that you've probably heard, and we've all heard this, is, you pro-lifers, you don't actually care about the moms, and once the baby's born, then you don't do anything to help. Honestly, you guys, you're not pro-life, you're just pro-birth. After they're born, you don't care. You and I know that's a bunch of bahookie, but we as a church, speaking broadly, the body of Christ, now that abortion is essentially illegal here in South Dakota, that means we have to step up even more. There's going to be more moms who need help, more dads who need help, more babies to be saved. So next I want to invite up the Alpha Center. We have Jenna here just to kind of talk us through all the different ways that we as a church, again, speaking broadly, the church body need to step up for moms and dads, just to be a helping hand that the church really should be. So Jenna? You want to just click to the right on your slides?
Hello. One really quick thing that I just wanted to clarify is our Move for Life event is September 24th. So sorry that was incorrect up there, but September 24th, it's a Saturday, not September 15th. All right. So how do we reverse 50 years of abortion? This is the task that post-Roe has inevitably caused, and the reversal starts with you and me. A blend of generations with ideals coming together to uphold what is right. The recent Supreme Court decision did not come without decades of fighting for the taint of abortion to be lifted from America. Thousands of people like you, the salt of the earth, image bearers of Christ, proclaiming his life throughout America. Thank you. It is truly an honor to stand here with you today in a post-Roe world. A victory indeed. However, post-Roe does not mean a world without abortion, or a world without the culture of death that has formed over the past 50 years. Now more than ever, we are facing evil. The latest headline by the Washington Post reads, "Doctor proposes floating abortion clinic in Gulf of Mexico to avoid bans." And yes, you heard and read correctly, floating abortion clinic. The pro-aborts are shouting louder while simultaneously secretly plotting to advance their agenda. The mindset that Roe v. Wade has created has a profound impact. Abortion is commonplace, the decision that's right for me. For many, not a decision they want, but a decision they feel is easier and convenient. 50 years of Roe has devalued life at all stages. The work of you and I going forward is to simply educate, be available, and love our neighbor. Our actions and responses in the post-Roe world are crucial to reversing the mindset of Roe and upholding life at all stages. Alpha Center has been clearing the confusion with a message of hope for over 38 years in the Sioux Falls community. The founders, Dr. Allen and Leslie Unruh, have worked diligently to battle abortion and create a haven for women and men. Individuals of all backgrounds, demographics, religions, and ages are served at a pregnancy center. A grandmother seeking assistance for her grandson, who is now in her care. A 25-year-old woman just beginning her career, wanting to see if her home pregnancy test was true. A 30-year-old woman in an abusive relationship looking for a way out. A scared teenager seeking information about an ultrasound and her pregnancy options. A college student exposed to an STD after a one-night stand. A woman from Africa who just moved to the area and is pregnant for the first time by a friend at work. A daughter feeling pressure to have an abortion by her mom because she is still in high school. A married couple seeking abortion for baby number 3 because they only plan to have 2. A 45-year-old who is pregnant again after raising her now 3 adult children. Women struggling with an abortion decision made years ago and are now seeking healing through an after-abortion care program. A young woman frantically searching for a way to reverse the effects of the first abortion pill because she was pressured by her boyfriend to have an abortion that she did not want. Engaged couples pursuing more parenting education so they can build a strong family together. A mother who chooses adoption and needs support throughout her pregnancy. A guy who is choosing to commit to his girlfriend and wants to get involved in a fatherhood mentoring program. A pregnant homeless woman who needs help simply finding a home and a job. A single mom of 3 middle-aged school children who finds herself pregnant again. What is the one thing all of these people have in common? Their need to experience the love of God despite their circumstances. God's impact through the work of a pregnancy center is vast. The Charlotte Lozier Institute's latest report documents more than 2,700 pregnancy centers nationwide, serving almost 2 million people at an estimated total value of services and material assistance of $270 million. The week after the Supreme Court released its final decision on June 24th, there was a woman who came to Alpha Center. She was emotional, struggling to grasp the reality that she was pregnant. In her mind, the best option for her was abortion because it was the right thing to do for her 5-year-old son. She deeply cared for her son, who has a significant learning disability. She could only see how having another baby would hinder the love, attention, and resources she needed to provide for him. This woman knew she could no longer receive an abortion in South Dakota. However, she was determined to find some place that would offer her abortion, even if it meant traveling a distance. The Holy Spirit led her to the Alpha Center that day, as he does for so many clients. We were able to sit together in her moments of fear, and I listened. I listened to her share how life is hard, gas prices are high, inflation makes feeding her family increasingly difficult. Her thoughts and emotions all valid. In her distress, I let her know that she is not alone. She is seen. She has a team of support at Alpha Center. She was then able to see her 6-week-old baby on the ultrasound that day and witness the strength of a tiny beating heart. Her 5-year-old son had in fact turned the ultrasound monitor towards his mom 3 times during the sonogram, as if to say, "Mom, look, this is my brother or sister." According to the South Dakota Department of Health Induced Abortion Report, 46.4% of women in 2021 chose abortion because they could not afford the child. That is a staggering statistic. The support and resources that a pregnancy center provides is critical to saving the unborn, maintaining the dignity of a mother, and strengthening the family unit. But we cannot do it alone. The community and the church are needed now more than ever to also walk alongside women, men, and families facing barriers to thrive. The ruling in the Dobbs case that overturned Roe v. Wade has ignited anger across the country. Anger channeled specifically towards pregnancy centers. A July 5th survey reveals that an alarming 35.8% of pregnancy centers had seen fake online reviews, 5.1% had experienced protests, and 12.4% had received threats. Why the need to harass centers that seek only to help and serve the women impacted by this ruling? This is the evil we are witnessing. The father of lies is creating misinformation and fear to bankrupt women of alternatives to abortion and rob them of positive practical support that pregnancy centers provide. There have been over 5 pro-abortion protests in Sioux Falls since June 24th. I vividly remember walking through the beautiful historic McKinnon Park after a protest that was held, reading chalk on the cement that said, "My body, my choice, and you can't take away my right to abortion." I challenge you to move toward conversations with individuals of differing views to abortion. Respond with patience, gentleness, and self-control. Clear the confusion with a message of hope. Inform your neighbors that women will still be treated for miscarriage and ectopic pregnancies. The intent and treatments are different. A new Charlotte Lozier Institute legal and medical analysis shows that all 23 states with strong pro-life laws currently allow necessary and timely medical treatment for ectopic pregnancies, miscarriage, and other procedures necessary to save the life of a pregnant woman. Share the statistic that only 1 to 3% of abortions are a result of rape or incest. Share that nationwide, women are continuing to seek abortion across the state border or a chemical abortion in the mail. And we see that weekly at Alpha Center. Explain how adoption and parenting are positive alternatives to abortion. Help a mother realize that she matters just as much as her unborn baby and her 3 other children in her care. This is how we start to reverse 50 years of Roe, valuing life in all of its forms. The South Dakota Department of Health Induced Abortion Report reads again that 68.8% of women in 2021 chose abortion because the mother simply did not desire to have the child. This, again, is the society that Roe v. Wade has created. Prevention is another key aspect in reversing the mindset of Roe. Encourage one another through the gospel to live a life of purity and chastity. Speak in your home and school about family values, character, and integrity. Evangelist Oswald Chambers states, "Those that live in the Spirit and keep right with God are a terror to Satan." Alpha Center's medical director, Dr. Glenn Ritter, poses the question, what would be missing from your family tree if you were not there? Your Father chose you to live in this time, your Heavenly Father. You are called, appointed, and prepared. What the enemy used for good, what the enemy used for evil, God intends for good. I challenge you in the post-Roe world to have the hard conversations with compassion and grace, to encourage your peers and grandchildren in purity, to throw a baby shower for a single mom in your church, to provide a bag of groceries for the pregnant mom in your workplace, to play a pickup game of basketball with an overwhelmed dad, offer to babysit for an evening, change the oil in a single mom's car, volunteer your time, talents, and finances at your local pregnancy center. Encourage community and church members to provide a practical and tangible service. Whatever your gifting is, use it and ask God how He wants to use you. This is how we reverse 50 years of Roe, loving humanity at every stage. And finally, pray. Pray without ceasing for a culture that strives to make abortion an unthinkable option. Oswald Chambers quotes again, "The very powers of darkness are paralyzed by prayer." Do you remember the client who came in a week after Roe was overturned? Well, I celebrate with you today when I say she indeed chose life. Because of you, your prayers, your support, and encouragement, her 5-year-old son, Lord willing, will grow up with a younger brother or sister. Psalm 90:17 guides us, declaring, "May the favor of the Lord our God rest on us. Establish the work of our hands for us." Yes, establish the work of our hands. Thank you.
Well, Jenny, you teed it up perfectly for our next presenter. It was a couple years ago, the first time I was really challenged with this. There was a pastor speaking of, hey, I know the pro-life community, you're hoping that here soon Roe is going to be overturned, or someday. You're talking about abortion being illegal, but are you as a church ready to step up and adopt? And Jenny, you teed us up perfectly. I want to invite Beth Hughes to come up next. Because again, we as the body of Christ, we got to help moms, we got to help dads, we got to help these kids. And sometimes that means adoption. So Beth, would you walk us through a few points of how we as a church can step into that?
Yes, thank you. Got a short 5 minutes here, so I'll talk fast. So we have not seen the needle move since Roe versus Wade was overturned. That's because adoption is a very high hurdle for women to get over. And yeah, we could say, are we on? Can you hear me?
A little closer.
Okay, we have not seen the needle move. We had reviewed 17 years of statistics from the state of South Dakota regarding the number of adoptions each year. This was before COVID, so before 2020. Looking at 17 years, an average of 54.5 women chose adoption every year across the whole state. 50. That number has even gotten less. When COVID hit, people thought, what will this do to the adoption numbers? They got even lower because people weren't going out, they weren't socializing, they weren't going to work, to restaurants, to bars. So adoption, it's not going to be the choice of abortion or adoption. I think it's going to be abortion or single parenting. And that can be good in some situations if a birth mother's in the church, has a big family support system. Some of those kids have turned out wonderfully. What we see, that's not the case. Some of these women have 3, 4, 5 children. We had a woman come to us a few years ago, her medical professional at Vera had suggested adoption. She had 3 children that were not in a good situation. So my husband, I'm not the lawyer, went up to the prison to get the consent of the birth father. He said that woman should not be. Here he sits in prison. That woman should not be parenting any of those children. She lives in a party home. Well, she had the baby and she decided to parent because she said, I just want to have another baby to kiss. Now, is that going to be good for the child? So we need to be thinking, how do we educate? We just had a 16-year-old articulate young woman. She went to have an abortion. She delivered this past weekend because she was past, thank God, the cutoff date when she could legally have an abortion. So she made an adoption plan. Wonderful childless couple. That child is going to have an amazing life in an open adoption. And I commend South Dakota Right to Life for the wonderful billboards about open adoption. What is true religion? True religion is to help and love widows and orphans. And these birth mothers, we consider them both widows because almost all of them are not married. They don't have a husband. So they're widows and they're orphans because hardly any of them have a family unit that's intact. So they're flying without a net. What open adoption does is it causes these amazing Christian couples who can't have children but for adoption to become the stabilizing force in the lives of these women. We've seen this one amazing Christian couple. They led their youth group up in Brookings. They were both, worked for the university. They've now adopted 3, but they have taken their birth mother, who's placed 2 of her kids with them, under their wing. And that was about 7 years ago. I just saw that birth mother this morning. She is working 2 jobs. She has accepted Jesus, and that adoptive father has come down to court hearings when she was so lost. I didn't know if she'd ever find her way in life, but she is, and I think it's because of that pouring. So we do what we have to do. Is that 16-year-old who delivered this weekend? She's articulate. And I was talking to her and she said, I still think abortion is better than adoption. And there's my 5 minutes. I'll finish quickly. I said, now, why do you think that? She said, because that child is going to grow up And when they find out they were adopted, they're going to feel bad. So I just rather abort. So we need to work with that mindset. And one final thing, high school counselors say that they can have a young woman like that come in. They say, I can single parent, or I can consider abortion. I could never do adoption. So my husband, who's the attorney, I'm not, he said we have to be laser focused on personhood. We need to educate our society and that this child is an innocent, independent human being and has a right to life.
Thank you, Beth. And I think you've seen today several examples of, as a church body, as the Christian church, where we can step up to help moms, to help dads, to help babies, to do what's in the best interest of kids. Sometimes the best interest of the kids is to get mom a few more resources and she's good to go. Sometimes the best interest of that child is for the mom to give it up to adoption because she has things she needs to work on. But whatever that looks like, that takes being personally plugged in with that lady, with her husband or boyfriend, with their actual life situation. So I want to close with just one story. So we did a little bit of rewinding today, but I want to rewind all the way back to ancient Rome. Because did you know that abortion was common in ancient Rome? They have all sorts of ancient writings about like different potions they would take or things they would do to kill the baby. It was super common. Or even after the baby was born, you could just kill it or leave it somewhere. It didn't matter. They didn't have any kind of rights. I think once they were like 1 or 2, then society started thinking of them as a kid. But babies were pretty much useless in ancient Rome unless you were royalty. So when the Bible talks about God adopting us as an orphan, we think of, okay, there was a tragedy or something like that, and so God stepped in. But that tragedy made in ancient Rome when things were written was the baby was just left in the ditch. God came and adopted them up. So we look back to ancient Rome, babies were virtually useless, nobody cared, abortion was common. What happened? Christianity spread. The church stepped up. Culture began to change. You've seen examples that Debbie pointed out of the ways that the different Right to Life chapters have been successful. We've seen what the Alpha Center is able to do. We've heard stories of what adoption does to people's lives. Historically, when the church steps up, culture improves. So that's the big challenge for Life After Roe here in South Dakota. How are we as a church body going to step up? If you want to help fight on policy matters like stopping that 2024 ballot initiative, on the handout that's on the chairs, the first 2 organizations listed there under Debbie and my names deal more with policy. The third one is Alpha Center's contact, and the fourth one is Beth Hughes and Heart to Heart Adoptions. Whatever angle you want to take, whatever direction you guys feel is best for you in your life, it's time for the church to step up. We need to be asking our friends and neighbors to join us as we step up to protect life after Roe in South Dakota.